From his place atop the battle castle's throne, Tobias eyes his sister with amused interest, clearly not having expected her to challenge him. But nonetheless, he shrugs that if she desires a battle, he will accept, if for no other reason than to prove that with his superior strength, he should be the frontier brain here. He then rises to his feet, descending the stairs to the throne with methodical measured steps, as his shadow falls over Ash, Barry and Caitlyn. Still in his tones of calm superiority, Tobias asks what the terms of their battle will be, and meeting his haughtiness with resolve, Caitlyn replies that she thinks the fairest assessment of their skill would be to use their oldest Pokemon in a one-on-one battle, winner take all. This last statement sets a sparkle to Tobias's exposed eye, and he replies that if those are our terms, he accepts. He then calls for his partner, Darkrai, to rise, and at once his shadow begins to ripple, as from it emerges a sinister-looking Pokemon, who shares Tobias's habit for only showing one eye. Being students of lore, Ash and Brandon know exactly how dangerous this Pokemon is said to be, and so share a concerned look, while Barry, never one for keeping his thoughts to himself, asks Derek how Curly is meant to beat that thing. However, here Derek smiles, telling the blonde that Curly is not Lady Caitlyn's first Pokemon. In fact, it's her weakest and newest one, being little more than a baby. Barry yelps a little at this, asking if Caitlyn really took down Argenta and a whole tournament full of people, including him and Ash, with just a baby? Derek nods, pride in his voice as he says that his lady is truly an exceptional trainer, when she sets her mind to be. Ash, however, has a very different question in mind, asking the battle butler who Caitlyn's first Pokemon is, since he and Barry have only ever seen her travel with Curlia. Derek replies that unlike Tobias, she never captured this Pokemon, since it was a childhood friend, but he has no doubt that now Lady Caitlyn needs its assistance, it will come to her aid. During this whole exchange, Caitlyn has remained silent, her eyes closed and her hands clutched around some sort of necklace she had been wearing under her dress. But at Derek's final remark, the girl's eyes open, and with her first smile since arriving here, she confirms that it will. Moments later, a high-pitched call fills the battle castle, as something blue, pink, and gold flies through one of the throne room's high windows, sending shards of stained glass flying everywhere, as light floods in behind it. This regal creature does a lap of the room before coming to rest beside Caitlyn, who ruffles its feathers and beams that she missed it. In his clear, rich voice, Tobias also greets the creature, naming it Cresselia and admitting that he and Darkrai have wanted to battle it for a very long time. The sibling trainers then turn to face each other, with Ash, Barry, Brandon, and Derek all taking steps back to give these two legendary Pokemon ample room to use their power. From the floor rises the battlefield, and when both Caitlyn and Tobias are in position, Derek moves to the referee's spot and calls for the battle to begin. At once, Darkrai and Cresselia fly forward at top speed, tackling into each other, then firing point-blank blasts of their respective types that blow them both back. Haughtily, Tobias asks if that's all Caitlyn can do, since in case she's forgotten, Darkrai is immune to psychic attacks, while Cresselia is particularly vulnerable to dark-type moves. Caitlyn scowls that she didn't forget, she simply wanted to get a gauge of his and Darkrai's power, so she doesn't overdo it in her next attack. This scorn causes a muscle to twitch in the usually calm young man's jaw, but he does not rise to the bait, instead simply calling for a dark pulse. Caitlyn matches this with a moonblast, causing Tobias to sigh that he'd forgotten how wily she could be, asking if she had Cresselia learn this as dark coverage in general, or specifically because she foresaw that one day they would have this battle. Caitlyn grins that it doesn't take prescience to know that one day his ambition would cause him to overreach, and when that day came, she knew she would have to have a strategy in place, since for all his faults, lack of battle acumen is not one of them. Tobias bows slightly at the compliment, before returning to his serious expression and calling for a dark void. Caitlyn calmly responds with a call for Lunar Blessing, and as an orb of pitch darkness surrounds Cresselia, the Lunar Pokemon lets out another cry, shattering the dark void and replacing it with an orb of sparkling blue starlight. As this too fades, a few of the sparkles cling to Cresselia's feathers, giving it an even more vibrant look, while Caitlyn asks Tobias if he forgot Cresselia's signature move. She then adds that if anything, she should thank him, since not only did Lunar Blessing protect Cresselia from sleep, but it also revitalized it in the process. Tobias smirks that it was his pleasure, adding that he didn't forget, he merely wanted to see if Caitlyn's reaction time had slowed any from slumming it with regular trainers. Fortunately, it has not. Leaning in to whisper to his father, Ash observes that it's almost like the siblings are testing each other, and Brandon replies he believes that is exactly what they are doing. As a user of legendary Pokemon, he has gotten pretty good at reading their strength, and by his best guess, Cresselia and Darkrai are perfectly matched in power, meaning the winner of this match will be the one with the better strategy. So right now, he's pretty sure both Caitlyn and Tobias are probing the other's abilities to see if they can find any weak points. Ash breathes that he's never seen a battle like that before, and with a smile, Brandon says that Ash should watch carefully then, since this is the caliber of trainer he'll need to be able to match if he wants to stand a chance against the final two Frontier Brains. Nodding, Ash returns his attention to the match, seeing that Cresselia and Darkrai have resumed their close range combat, slamming into each other and breaking apart over and over again. As his father had said, it is a perfect stalemate, and seeing this, Caitlyn and Tobias call their starters back to their sides. Looking at Derek, Caitlyn apologizes this will probably mean a lot of cleaning up for the battle butler, then with a look of stern determination, asks Tobias if he's ready to bring this match to its crescendo. Grinning, Tobias replies that he is if she is, to which Caitlyn smiles that in that case, let them put this rivalry to bed with one last all-out attack. At once, a bright blue psionic orb forms around Cresselia, while a red one does the same with Darkrai, and in unison the twins cry for their Pokemon to use Moonblast and Dark Pulse respectively. Throughout the throne room, everyone feels their skin tingle, as though some ethereal energy is washing over them, and when the two attacks bloom into view, their power is increased to a point that makes their previous iterations seem weak by comparison. An instant later, these titanic blows collide, and the force is sufficient to shake the very foundations of the battle castle. However, power of this magnitude cannot be contained for long, and so when neither attack yields to the other, both cease to be, creating a massive psychic explosion, which swallows up the two legends and sends forth a shockwave which knocks everyone but the combatants off their feet. As the remaining stained glass windows shatter above them and cracks begin to form in the marble floor, Ash and Barry cry out their support for Cresselia and Caitlyn. And hearing this over the din, Caitlyn joins her voice to theirs, pleading for her old friend to stay strong. As if responding to their hearts, a shrill call fills the resulting smoke cloud, and when it fades, a battered Cresselia floats just above the ground, while Darkrai lies prone, unable to battle. Rushing onto the field, Caitlyn gives Cresselia a hug, while Tobias gracefully saunters over, bending down to sling one of Darkrai's arms over his shoulder, thanking it for its effort. He then looks over to his sister, a smirk curving the corners of his mouth, and with something like admiration, he concedes defeat, admitting that he had underestimated her conviction as a Frontier Brain, and as a trainer. Smiling, Caitlyn tells her twin that if he wants, he could stay here and train with her, but the dark-haired young man declines, saying that perhaps it's time he took a journey of his own, since it did wonders for her, and who knows, along the way he may be able to encounter some more legendary Pokemon to add to his team. Caitlyn and Derek wish him luck in this endeavor, and with that, Tobias takes his leave with Darkrai. When they are gone, Caitlyn collapses in a heap, breathing heavily and admitting that she'd forgotten how taxing a real battle could be. Cresselia along with Ash, Barry and Derek rush to her side, asking if she'll be alright, but Caitlyn smiles that after a good night's sleep she'll be fine. She then gives her two companions a rueful smile, saying she had meant to give them their battles today, but it looks like it'll have to wait. Ash smiles that it's fine, while Barry jokingly says that he'll forgive her, this time. Caitlyn thanks them for their understanding, then as if it was only this that was keeping her awake, she passes out. Bending down, Derek lifts Caitlyn from the floor, telling the boys that he will make sure his lady is returned safely to her chambers. In the meantime, they are free to make use of the Battle Castle's facilities, advising they train hard, since as they have just witnessed, underestimating Lady Caitlyn is a grave mistake. Remembering their own battles against her in the tag tournament, Ash and Barry have no reason to doubt Derek's words, and so as he departs, they decide to use this time to prepare. Ash chooses to do this by seeking out a place he and his Pokemon can do some last-minute training, but to everyone's surprise, Barry, the perpetual motion machine, decides to instead stay right here and talk with Brandon, since he didn't really get a chance before, and his dad always said Brandon is probably the strongest Frontier Brain. Brandon graciously accepts the compliment, saying he'd be happy to talk with Barry about whatever the young man wants. However, this might be a misstep, as the blonde boy immediately starts to shoot off rapid-fire questions about his training regimen, favorite battle strategies, and tips for an aspiring Frontier Brain. Slow and steady Brandon's eyes briefly go wide at this barrage, but he would not be a frontier brain if he could not adapt, and so after only the slightest of pauses to get his bearing, he starts to respond to all of Barry's questions just as quickly as he can ask them, while not compromising thoughtfulness, as each answer is as insightful as the last. Leaving his father to his Herculean task, Ash explores the battle castle, finding several large dining rooms, a ballroom, and even a gallery filled with paintings of a younger Caitlyn, Tobias, and people who Ash can only assume are their parents. However, what he's really looking for is a training room, and the young man is not disappointed when he ventures into the basement. Here he finds a room the size of the Battle Pyramid's main arena, filled with various pieces of training equipment, which all appear to be of the highest quality money can buy. Not only that, but Ash also spots a Pokemon he is not familiar with, hurling psychic bolts of energy at a robotic target as it scuttles around the room trying to dodge. As the Pokemon turns to blast the target again, it catches sight of Ash, and he in turn is able to see it more clearly. It is a small green creature floating in a cocoon of similarly verdant amniotic fluid that is somehow both spherical and triangular. It clearly also possesses powerful psychic abilities, as with a swipe of its tiny hand, it lifts the target bot into the air and sends it sailing onto a shelf where it comes to rest. It then approaches the boy curiously, giving him a familiar smile and reaching out a hand. Ash pats the gooey creature, laughing a little at the way its gelatinous coating ripples under his touch. From behind him, Ash hears Derek's voice as the battle butler enters, saying that Duosion can sense Lady Caitlyn's psychic residue on Ash, and that's why it's taken a shine to him so quickly. He then lays out a bowl of food, which Duosion psychically lifts into the air with one hand, while using the other to make pellets of food float over and into its mouth. With an approving sound to his voice, Derek comments that Duosion is always training, eager for the day it can battle alongside Lady Caitlyn once again. Intrigued, Ash asks if this means Duosion is Caitlyn's, and Derek nods, saying that while Cresselia is the first Pokemon his mistress bonded with, Duosion was her first official capture, and so has been a loyal companion from the day she became a trainer. Duosion warbles happily at this memory, and Ash grins that he knows what a special bond that is, thinking of Meltan. Nodding sagely, Derek calls this one more reason to be extra careful tomorrow, since Duosion will no doubt be one of the Pokemon chosen for the battle. Grinning, Ash says he looks forward to facing it, then heads over to the other side of the room to do some last-minute preparation with his own Pokemon. The next morning dawns bright and early, and with fire in their eyes, Ash and Barry both leap out of their extremely plush beds, eager to earn their fourth prince. When they are dressed and ready, the pair head down the grand staircase, and to their delight find Caitlyn waiting for them on the throne of the battle castle, while Derek waits at her side and Brandon watches from a corner. Smiling, Caitlyn greets her friends a bit more formally than she otherwise would have, clearly playing the role of both Frontier Brain and Lady of the Castle, as she asks if they wish to challenge her for the castle print. Without hesitation, Ash and Barry both say yes, and so Caitlyn descends her throne, taking her place at the end of the battlefield. Cresselia, who had been lounging beside the throne, floats over to join her friend, and the Frontier Brain pats it fondly, asking if it will help her battle once more. Cresselia chirps happily at the request, and so Caitlyn looks back to her traveling companions, telling Ash to enter the ring whenever he's ready. Barry looks a little annoyed at not being chosen first, but then a grin crosses his face, and he exclaims that he sees what Caitlyn's doing, saving the best for last. Very clever. Caitlyn, however, barely dignifies this with a response, dismissing the boy with a shrug of, "Whatever you say, Barry," her eyes still firmly on Ash. Stepping onto the field, Ash asks what the rules of this facility are, and Caitlyn replies that their battle will be one of the styles created in her home region of Unova. Ash looks surprised at this, admitting he had assumed this place was her home considering all the family paintings, but Caitlyn blithely replies that this is only her family's summer home. That's why her parents were okay with her turning it into a battle facility when she became a Frontier Brain. Ash, however, seems unfazed by this, being more curious about this Unovan battle style, and so not wanting to keep him waiting, Caitlyn tells her friend that they will have a rotation battle. In truth, it's not that far removed from a normal 3v3, except both of them can substitute, and the substituted Pokemon physically trade places with the Pokemon they're tagging out. Additionally, the battle ends when one of their Pokemon faints, so switching is vital for defense, just as it is for offense. She then has Derek present her and Ash with a pair of metal briefcases, inside which Ash finds a circular device that appears to be some sort of remote control, bearing a dial, a downward arrow on top, and 3 buttons. He also finds 3 small discs, one red, one blue, and one yellow, which each correspond to the colors of one of the buttons. things. Seeing his uncertainty, Caitlyn explains that the discs are what allow the Pokemon to switch, pulling 2 from her case and putting the red one on herself and the blue on Derek. She then presses down on the red button, which is currently directly below the arrow, and spins the dial so now the blue button is where the red one had just been. As soon as the blue button is beneath the arrow, she and Derek switch places in a way quite similar to a teleportation, and at last Ash thinks he understands. Caitlyn then removes the discs from herself and Derek, and along with the yellow one, places them on all 3 of her Pokemon, those being Cresselia, Curlia, and Duosion. Ash follows suit, bringing out Chimchar, Zoro, and Gabite, having decided that these 3 could use a bit more battle experience. Caitlyn says nothing to this choice, even though she is well aware that Meltan would be a smarter one due to its psychic resistance. Instead, she focuses on Zoroark, eyeing it cautiously, with Ash and Barry knowing that she's remembering the heavy damage it did to Buck's Claydol during their battle. Drawing inspiration from this, Ash decides to have Zoroark be his first Pokemon, placing the red disc on it, while Caitlyn places her blue disc on Curlia, marking it as her opener. Both Pokemon then make their way onto the battlefield, while the other 2 take up positions beside their trainers. And when everyone is in position, Derek calls for the battle to begin. Declaring that it ought to be ladies first, Caitlyn takes the first move, having Curlia open with its trusty Psybeam, which lifts Zoro into the air, clearly planning to throw or slam it back down for devastating damage. However, Ash has seen this strategy before, and so tells Caitlyn that she can't just use her old tricks, since he's been watching her battle enough to figure out a way out of this, and in fact, it was her who taught him how. He then calls for a Shadow Sneak, and at once Zoro becomes smoke, using its incorporeality to break free of the psychic hold and rush behind Curlia. As it manifests, the spiteful fox attempts to take a bite out of its opponent, and it is only thanks to Curlia's supernatural reflexes it is able to dance out of the way of the blow. But Ash's offensive is not done, and so seeing an opening, he calls for that mystery freezing move to hold Curlia in place. Bearing its fangs, Zoroark complies, blasting Curlia with dark energy which freezes it solid, trapping the psychic type mid-pirouette. Grinning, Ash next commands Zoro to finish things with Slash, but Caitlyn seems unfazed, wordlessly watching the fox charge her helpless Pokemon. Raising a claw, Zoro prepares to slice down on Curlia, but this is exactly what Caitlyn wanted, a small smile crossing her lips as she presses down on her remote. At once, Curlia is gone, with Duosion taking its place, and unable to stop itself now, Zoroark's claw cleaves cleanly through one of the points protruding from its gelatinous outer shell. This does not seem to bother Duosion in the slightest, however, as with a brief look of concentration, it draws the severed point back in and reattaches it before looking over at Zoro with a wide smile. In contrast, Zorua snarls at its opponent, hitting for super effective damage, which still seems to not trouble it, and so seeing no other play, Ash tells his Pokemon to slash it again. With a howl, Zoroark lunges at its prey, but Caitlyn simply grins, instructing her Pokemon to counter with Psychic. Ash's blood runs cold at this, knowing how much stronger the move is compared to Curlia's already formidable Psybeam, but it's already too late, and so to his horror, Duosion's eyes flash blue, as all around it a pulse of psionic energy bursts forth, sending Zoroark flying back. Scrambling for his remote, Ash switches in Gabite, hoping that as the tankiest of his team, and having taken no damage so far, it will be able to endure the hit. However, as the dragon crashes into the wall in its Vulpine comrade's stead, Ash sees that this is a vain hope, as when the dust settles, Gabite is declared unable to battle. Ash is in shock. Gabite was taken out by just one of Duosion's attacks, and not even that. The aftershock of the attack was too much for his team's strongest. If that is Caitlyn's true power, then it's like Palmer and his dad said, she really is on a whole other level. From his corner, Brandon gives his son a sympathetic look, and recalling Gabite, Ash goes to stand with him, asking if his dad saw where he went wrong. In a measured tone, Brandon says that Ash didn't go wrong per se, he just didn't use his resources to the fullest. Had it been him, Brandon says he might have employed something a bit more akin to hit and run tactics, keeping his fastest Pokemon on the field for the majority of the battle, then shifting into a heavy hitter when it's time to attack. Or like Ash did, switching to a more defensively inclined Pokemon when taking damage is unavoidable. He then continues that Ash was able to figure out part of that on his own in the heat of battle, which is praiseworthy. He just has to refine it now, so that next time he faces Caitlyn he'll be able to win. Ash thanks his father for the words of advice and encouragement, then the pair fall silent as Barry takes to the field. Grinning broadly, the son of Palmer declares that he's ready to give this rotation battle a try, since if the key to this battle style is quick shifts, then he's set, since no one's quicker than him. Caitlyn acknowledges that perhaps his Pachirisu brain would come in handy for rotation battles, though it's something of a moot point, since they won't be having one. Goggling, Barry asks if Caitlyn really just said she wouldn't battle him, but the brain shakes her head, saying she'll battle him, just not in a rotation battle. After all, she already told Ash that it is one of the styles created in Unova. The other is called a triple battle, and that will be how the two of them will be facing off. In practice, it's not too dissimilar to a double battle, like the one they had back in Hearthome, except instead of 2 Pokemon, they will each be commanding 3. She then smiles that she hopes Barry's up to the challenge of balancing 3 Pokemon at once, but the cocky blonde replies that he'll take on any challenge, urging her to bring out her Pokemon. A moment later, after Derek has his Houndoom Thor Curlier, Caitlyn obliges, using the same team as she did against Ash. Barry in turn uses Empoleon, Shogun, and Chatot, and when all 6 Pokemon are ready to go, Derek calls for the battle to begin. Once more, Caitlyn claims the first move, having Curlier and Duosion leap in front of Cresselia and use Reflect and Light Screen respectively. Briefly, 2 shimmering screens appear in front of Caitlyn's team, but when they fade, Barry declares that she'll have to do better than that, since he and his team will just bust through their barriers. He then yells for his Pokemon to form up and rush Caitlyn's team, but it seems this is a mistake, a fact Caitlyn is more than happy to point out, as she tells Duosion to use Psychic. Once more, the Mitosis Pokemon fires off a pulse of energy, and though Barry tells his team to scatter, the fact that they're all bunched up means that none of them can avoid the blast. Chatot and Shogun fall just as Gabite did under the force of this attack, but due to its bulky body and psychic resistance, Empoleon remains standing, though just barely. Grinning like a madman, Barry cheers that he knew his partner would come through for him, ordering it to keep going with a Metal Claw. Clenching its beak, Empoleon nods, and its wings begin to glow as it readies this last charge. Caitlyn, for her part, is stunned. She had not expected anyone to withstand one of Duosion's attacks, but despite this impressive showing, she knows in her heart that Barry and Empoleon are not up to the level they need to be to defeat her. With a touch of sadness, the lady of the castle calls for a Shadow Sneak, and at once Curlier vanishes, reappearing in front of Empoleon and driving an arm into its stomach. This is too much for the Emperor Pokemon, and with a quiet gasp, it collapses, ending the battle. Now it is Barry's turn to be stunned, though having grown since his last defeat at Caitlyn's hands, he does not collapse or cry this time, instead looking Caitlyn dead in the eye, and with a tone of only slightly shaky confidence, promises that next time they battle, things will be different. Smiling, Caitlyn says she hopes so, but he and Ash should know that she isn't going to pull any punches just because they're friends. Ash and Barry both nod that they wouldn't have it any other way, and so even though the battles both ended in defeat, everyone leaves with feelings of new purpose. Speaking of leaving, it is not long after this that Brandon declares his intention to depart. He's glad he got to see Ash battle, but unfortunately there are matters he must attend to, though hopefully the gap between when he sees his son again will be shorter than the last one. Ash is understandably disappointed that his dad won't get to see him win his castle print, but all the same, he wishes him luck in his endeavours, and the pair part on good terms. Following this departure, Ash and Barry get down to training, with Caitlyn graciously allowing them to make use of her training room. Derek even loans them the equipment that Ash used for his rotation battle, so they can better familiarize themselves with the style. As a result, this becomes Ash's primary focus, while Barry works on improving his skills with triple battles. After a few hours, Ash starts to get the hang of tactically switching his Pokemon to make use of their special skills and compensating for each other's weaknesses, while Barry is able to come up with a few new combo moves for his 3 Pokemon. Around dinner time, Caitlyn comes down to watch them, and though she is impressed with their ability to learn new skills, she warns that it's never wise to curtail one's learning solely to what they know they will face, since it will make them vulnerable to the unexpected. Ash has to admit that he can see the wisdom in this philosophy, but Barry disagrees, saying he doesn't like wasting time on sidetracks, so while he appreciates the tip, he's gonna do things his way. A little peevishly, Caitlyn reminds her friend that doing things his way resulted in a bad loss. However, Barry stubbornly insists this was only because he was using an unfamiliar battling style. Sighing, Caitlyn says that's exactly her point, and this causes Barry to stop in his tracks as he attempts to unravel this verbal turnabout. Unfortunately, this proves too much of a puzzler for the blonde boy, and so furiously rubbing his head, he yells at Caitlyn to stop confusing him and let him train. With a huff, Caitlyn replies that if that's what Barry wants, she'll leave him be, but not to come crying to her when she clobbers him for a second time. Glaring, Barry protests the only crying he'll be doing is tears of joy when he wins his castle point without breaking a sweat, but Caitlyn tells him to dream on as she swans away, leaving the boys to their work. For 3 more days, Ash and Barry keep to their training routine, rising at dawn and not stopping until the moon is high in the sky. It is hard work, but by the time they break for dinner on the 3rd day, both are confident they have what it takes to face Caitlyn again. With a mix of doubt and interest in her voice, Caitlyn asks if they really think they're ready to take her on again after only a few days training, but Barry grins that he's certain of it, vowing to win this time for sure, while Ash, not wanting to fall behind his rival, nods as well. Her tone now definitely shifting more towards the doubt side, Caitlyn sighs that very well if that is their wish, and as a frontier brain, she is obligated to grant it. And so it is that when the boys come down the grand staircase the following morning, Caitlyn is waiting on her throne. With the previous night's skepticism still in her tone, she asks one last time if they're sure they don't want a bit more time to train. But in this, Ash and Barry are certain, matching confident grins on their faces. Looking resigned, Caitlyn then rises to her feet and bids whichever one of them wishes to challenge her first to step forward. Briefly, Ash and Barry share a nod. Then without a word, Ash steps forward, ready to battle. And that's where we'll leave things. What twists and turns await our heroes in their rematch battles? Have Ash and Barry prepared enough to take on a trainer even the strongest frontier brains view as an equal? And can their friendship with Caitlyn survive one way or the other? Find out as the journey continues.